Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm RexFinance, and today I have a very special video for you where I interview perhaps my lowest risk and highest potential return stock in my entire portfolio. In addition to this stock is related to the battery industry. And if you know anything about batteries, you know that batteries are going to prosper over the next coming decades. Better yet, most people don't even know this company exists, and they don't know that the niche that they are in the battery industry is set to explode. Anyways, just a disclaimer, I was not paid by the company or any affiliated parties to do this interview. I just did this interview out of my own curiosity to hopefully help other investors better understand what this company is and what they do. Also, if you could not tell already, I am long on this stock where I own shares and call options in this company. So just keep that in mind as you watch this interview. Behind me, you can see LICY's disclaimer. You can pause this video and read through this if you want, or you can access this on their investor presentation on their investor relations website, which will be linked down in the description below. Lastly, if by chance you are new here or returning and not yet subscribed to this YouTube channel, I would highly encourage you to do so you don't miss out on any of my future videos that I do on stock market related content. If you want more interviews like this, please hit that like button down below, and also feel free to share this interview with anybody that you think might be interested in investing in this company. Before we jump into the interview, I also want to say that one of the executives was actually recording this interview from a hotel lobby. So at times during this interview, the background noise can get a little bit loud, but try and look past that, because if you dig deep and listen in on what these executives are saying, I mean, personally, I believe the current valuation for this company is very, very low. And over the coming years, as a long-term investor, I believe I'm going to make lots of money with this investment. But anyways, now let's go ahead and get into this intervie. All right, guys, so I'm here with LICY's Ajay and Tim Johnston. They relate to me very much because they're younger executives of a company called LICY, who is North America's largest lithium-ion battery recycling company. So without further ado, let's just have Ajay and Tim kind of introduce themselves and the company.
Great. Hey, Ben, I'll start, and hi to all the viewers. This is Ajay Kochhar here, one of the co-founders and CEOs, Ben just said. We'll get into the backstory of LICY, but really quickly, I'm a chemical engineer by background. Tim and I both used to work in the lithium space. So you can probably think of us as battery and specialty material geeks if you want. That's our background. We're super passionate about this. I've been for a long time. And we left that in 2016. We were building facilities that make lithium chemicals that go into batteries. And there was just this massive looming question about not only end of life of batteries, but also scrap. As you make batteries is not perfect. It kicks off materials that need to be recycled. So that's LICY. We're addressing that. And that's where we are today. We'll get that much more, but great pleasure and super excited about our future at LICY and path ahead. Turn over to Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Ajay. And thanks, Ben, and everyone for tuning in. My name's Tim Johnston. I'm the executive chairman and one of the co-founders here at LICY. Just in terms of a little bit of background about me, similar to Ajay, technical guy, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm also a CFA charter holder. So I've been spending my career spanning the technical and financial world, but really, come from the battery metal space. I started working in the lithium industry in the late 2000s. I'm not sure if you can tell, Ben, that I'm maybe not quite from North America, but I traveled the world for the better part of a decade, helping clients develop lithium assets all over the world before settling here in North America in 2015 and starting LICY with Ajay in 2016.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously both of you are very qualified for being executives of this company. And, Tim is dedicated. He's in a hotel lobby doing this. So I owe him a massive thank you. But anyway, let's go ahead and start getting into LICY's technology. Can you just walk us through, one of you, how LICY's technology works, what the process is?
Yeah, sure. Why don't I start, Ajay, and then you jump in. And so LICY has a two-part proprietary process. We refer to this as the spoke and hub model, simply because the spoke facilities are highly disaggregated. The concept behind this was that we needed to be close to where battery materials are being generated. And battery materials tend to focus on where population centers are. We all have mobile phones and laptops and things that we carry around and use every day. And so therefore the batteries tend to follow all these devices and ultimately follow these people. So we developed this process. It's a wholly owned LICY process where we can take in literally any format of lithium-ion battery. I always like to point out that We'll process everything from the smallest lithium-ion battery that you can imagine, in a mic or a hearing aid, all the way up to and including electric vehicle modules and full battery packs. Along with that, of course, a lot of your viewers will appreciate that lithium-ion batteries just aren't one type of battery. In fact, there's a whole family of chemistries. And so not only are we form factor agnostic, we're also chemistry agnostic. And then we take all that material, it all gets processed in through the same funnel. We process it into what we call our submerged shredding process, which is basically the fancy way of saying that we process these materials in a water-based solution. And we do that in order to do it safely, to maximize recovery, and then prevent some of the harmful materials that would be emitted if you were to do this in a atmospheric environment, exposed to air or at temperature, which was how it used to be done. From our Spoke facilities, we generate 3 key products: low-density plastic, a copper aluminum shredded material. But the key material that we're after is a material called black mass. And black mass, the best way to think about that is that's the active materials within the lithium-ion battery. That's where the graphite is, the nickel, the cobalt, the lithium. They all exist within this black mass material. So today, Li-Cycle is a company that generates revenue selling this material, along with the copper and aluminum and the plastics. We sell this material to third parties who then basically process it through traditional mineral processing lines, mixing in with mineral concentrates, usually to recover parts of the nickel and cobalt. But coming back to our background was always about, well, how do you process and produce lithium materials, but also how do you process something in a fit-for-purpose fashion, which brings us to our hub. So now we have multiple spokes that then move the material, this black mass material, to a centralized facility that we call a hub. And once again, we've decided to focus on a fit-for-purpose process that takes that material. It's a water-based process whereby we effectively, technical terms, leach. We basically dissolve the metals into solution, and we go through the process of ultimately producing battery-grade chemicals that can go back into new batteries. This is once again, it's a highly proprietary process that Li-Cycle has developed. In terms of where we are today as an organization, we have a commercially operating spoke in Kingston, another one in Rochester, New York. We're building a third one in Arizona as we speak, and we're fast approaching the breaking ground of our first commercial hub, which will also be in Rochester, New York later this year.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. Ajay, do you want to add anything to that?
No, spot on. I think just thing I'd point out to people on social media there is, Tim touched on, all types of batteries that people can relate to. Just the one to really emphasize, because a lot of people say, hey, isn't this something for 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I'm worried that they won't have a lot of material to actually process. One thing to realize is actually, and I know you've covered this, Ben, in your video, that you actually have scrap that's being produced when you make batteries. So making batteries isn't perfect. I'll give you a stat. 2013, there were 3 quote unquote battery mega factories in the pipeline around the world. Tim and I were working in the industry at that time. Today, 2021, the number keeps going up every week. The latest number is 225 battery mega factories in the pipeline around the world. Now, that's to meet the demand, electrification, everything else. But every one of those factories isn't perfect. There's offcuts, there's rejects that get kicked off of the battery making process, maybe a low % of their output, but through a lot of factories, it's a lot of material. So our business, the first inning of our business, which is what relates to the financials and where we're going and how we're rolling out, the bulk of that is actually scrap. But at the same time, we can't lose our eye off the ball of the ultimate also end of life prize, which you should also keep in mind is by nature 10x the amount of scrap. So just something to just keep in mind in terms of how our business is progressing over time.
Right. Yeah. So that's all really exciting stuff. Maybe this is a question for Tim as we move on here, but do you believe that lithium will always be included in the dominant battery type? And then along those lines, what steps are you as a company, Li-Cycle, taking to make sure you don't lose viability if demand for lithium drops significantly?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as we see it, that the lithium-ion family is continuing to evolve. That battery when I first started in the industry, there was literally only 3 different chemistries that were used. Now there's literally dozens of different chemistries that are used across the industry. We're a firm believer that lithium-ion will be a dominant form for at least the next decade. But what we're actually really excited about is solid-state batteries. Because when we look at a solid-state battery by comparison to a lithium-ion battery, the cathode is very similar, so it still needs the nickel and cobalt and lithium and everything else there. But the graphite is actually one of the least recyclable parts of a lithium-ion battery, and that's just because we use natural graphite, we use synthetic graphite, some use silicon doping, there's a whole range of different things. And because people, use a whole variety of different inputs, and then you're really concentrating on the physical form factor of that graphite, which changes over time, it just makes it less recyclable than a metallic component. So we have our own patents around the recycling of solid-state batteries. We process a small number of them. We start to see them. LifeCycle receives all different sorts of R&D material from different customers. And so we do get solid-state batteries that come through, and we process them alongside lithium-ion. So we're actually really excited for that next generation of batteries. In terms of like some of the more, let's say, fringe style batteries, where people have talked about iron-based batteries, vanadium-based batteries, we believe that there's potential there. We don't see it being a dominant part of the commercial framework for batteries in the future, particularly on the consumer and EV side, just because of the physics. And, I don't want to bore you and everyone else, but just lithium is just such a great element for working within a battery that as long as we can get it back in the hands of those who make the batteries, I don't really see any real reason why we would move away from the lithium-based technologies for the foreseeable future.
Right. So that's exciting to hear as a long-term investor in the company. And I think Ajay kind of touched on this where, when you first started LifeCycle, or you were thinking about starting the company, people were coming at you guys saying, you're too early to this industry. What are you doing? So my question now is, are you still getting those types of comments, or are they kind of now eating their own words and they're seeing the potential a company like LifeCycle has?
Yeah, it depends on if they passed up in the early days. But no, I think no one really says that anymore, to be candid. But I think we're in a really exciting time. Like, just park aside maybe for a moment capital markets. Just going to talk a little bit about like the trends in industry. I mean, we work publicly, people know, with Ultium, and that's a joint venture between General Motors and LG Energy Solution. So I mean, for GM, 30 models, electrifying their full lineup. I mean, I've seen the Hummer. Like, this is unprecedented. Like, Tim and I have been in this industry for a while. It's been a very short period of time how things have kind of changed so quickly. But there was a long time there where, like, and even they were trying to figure out themselves, OEMs, what are they going to do? What's the strategy? It's completely retool. And they're still, to this day, continue to be nimble, try to be nimble and retool what they're doing internally in the company. But it's a very different time, right? So we used to be in the industry at a time where people say, oh, when is this going to happen? And is it going to happen? Like, it was an if almost. And now it's not that. This is how big, when, who, where, no if. So on the back of that, you have to have recycling. It's an imperative. And I think we're seeing that just from the demand, the sheer customer support. So yeah, no one says that to us anymore. But
yeah, I didn't figure so. Anyways, so we've talked about this huge demand that's coming along. I mean, on so many different fronts. As an investor, I have to question. You have that 5-year rollout plan that you've pictured on your investor presentation, for example. And when I look at that, it almost seems like it might be a bit conservative. Is that a fair judgment to that? Do you guys see yourselves expanding quicker than you originally thought?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reality is that we put out a plan that we thought was easily achievable because we wanted to set a reasonable baseline, right? We're technical guys. We like running businesses. We like developing technology. We're not promoters. And so our goal is to build something that's sustainable. And we thought that the business proposition of that very conservative baseline was sufficient enough to be able to demonstrate that there's value in what we're doing. The reality is our customers continue to pull us stronger and stronger into this space. And so I feel confident that what you're going to see over time is that there's going to be greater and greater need for what we're doing, which is going to drive us to grow over time at a faster rate.
Yeah, and maybe
yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, like, from just to help people understand, it's accelerating. I mean, the rate of change is continuing to grow. So, I mean, as an example, just North America. I mean, even a year ago, it was very hard for us necessarily to point to and say, hey, where is battery cell making going to be? That's obviously important for scrap as a base load. And there's EVs that come out on the demand side as well. But like contrast, we have our very detailed process we go through with customers and data and how we drive where we're going to go and when. But that keeps changing. And I mean, one example of that would be, I'd say probably 6 months ago, by 25, the manufacturing capacity estimate for North America for batteries, people might know, viewers, I'm not sure, but express it in gigawatt hours. That's an energy thing. So that number used to be about 60 to 80 gigawatt hours of manufacturing capacity forecasted by 2025 in North America. Now, just 6 months later, in North America, that number is almost 300 gigawatt hours.
Wow, that's crazy.
So people can start to you can understand, right? And there's only so many companies that are really driving that, say, North America. So for us, it's just, how do we keep up? And we just have to be rigorous in how we choose to execute what first. That's the onus on us. But it's an exciting time. And so hence, to Tim's point, we decided to put out something that was more conservative, and we'll be transparent with the market in our quarterlies and annuals as to how that's going to continue to grow.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear that. So along these lines, I have to ask, because I think I recall you mentioned that, this SPAC merger is going to fully fund your 5-year rollout plan. So with you expanding quicker than you originally thought, do you think there's going to be more potential need for somewhat of dilution or equity debt financing or something to help propel the quicker expansion?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so as we sort of look forward, one of the things that, when it comes to building these style of plants, it's very unusual to build them on a 100% equity basis, which is what we base our business plan on. And so we do see opportunities to access additional pools of capital, and we're continuing to work on these. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, so it's not limited to, traditional equity and debt, but there's also, government organizations, export development agencies, etc., that are really looking to support this industry with different forms of financing. So not saying that we will go down that path. I mean, it's going to be market-led. Like, one of the key things about Li-Cycle as an organization is we like to be led by our customers. And so once again, that pull from our customers, that also has the potential to relate back to, how we actually, if we were to grow beyond that baseline plan, how we finance that.
Yeah, and I think the priority, to Tim's point, for the board is, we have a ton of options open for anything incremental. I think it's really just to be strategic about, we don't want to use equity all the time to buy crystallizers for the hub. That's not the objective. So, it's just being smart about that and kind of moving down the cost of capital stack as we're continuing to get more mature as well, if needed. Again, not foreseen today, but if needed.
Right. Okay. Good to hear that as well. This wouldn't be a Li-Cycle interview if we didn't talk about Redwood a little bit. So could one of you or both of you, kind of compare and contrast, Li-Cycle to Redwood Materials? What advantages does Li-Cycle have over Redwood, and what advantages does Redwood have over Li-Cycle, that type of thing?
Yeah, for sure. Why don't I start, Ajay, and then feel free to jump in. So, I think let's start with the basis is that, we have a huge respect for JB, Redwood, and the team, right? The reality is that we both saw the same needs evolving in the industry. We would argue probably slightly ahead of the curve there, just because we started first. But they saw that, it's clear that, they were producing, JB saw the production of batteries, and he could see that this, amount of scrap that was generated, that this was going to be an obvious potential for recapturing some of those materials and bringing them back into the supply chain. Where we start to differ is that, Redwood's history is really based around auto manufacturing and that side of it. Ajay and I's background is really about the production of the materials that made the batteries in the first place. And so the Redwood model is based on, what we would call the traditional processing model, which really includes, it's very similar to, you remember how I said we sell concentrate today back into that mineral processing supply chain? Very similar to that process. And so it incorporates a high temperature processing step, which basically, from a technical perspective, and without going into a huge amount of detail around it, basically you're melting everything down, but you're also burning a lot of the materials off as you do that process. But you're also then basically producing just another intermediate step or another intermediate product that then needs to then go ultimately to a hydrometallurgical refinery to separate out those different metals. You've made your life a lot harder on the lithium side because you've complexed it with other materials and what we call the slag, which is the waste component in that high temperature process. Life cycle by comparison, it's all water-based. We don't generate any wastewater. There's no meaningful air emissions. So from an ESG perspective, it's a much better concept for customers to get their heads around. But also from a technical and economic perspective, if the battery was an ore body that existed in the Earth's crust today, I like to use this analogy. Us as traditional engineers would not recommend processing it the same way that the industry processes it today, because that industry was designed for a very specific type of ore body. The reality is the materials in the battery lend themselves to skipping that high temperature step and going directly to that water-based process and that hydrometallurgical process. So what we're able to do is skip a major, which is also a costly piece of the process, and go directly to the refining piece, which allows us to capture more material because we haven't burnt off material. Okay. But then also it allows us to do it in a lower cost fashion because we're skipping one of those major steps. And so what you end up having is a process with, we like to say, Li-Cycle is able to capture more revenue because we produce more products, but we're also able to do it at a lower overall cost because we've removed the major processing step as part of that. Combine that with some of the smart things that we're able to do through, the technology that we've developed within Li-Cycle to further drive down that cost. And we ultimately end up with a bigger spread between the revenue and the cost basis, which we think is a better economic model long term. The added benefit is that there's also a more environmentally friendly solution for our customers, which, to be frank, are becoming more and more conscious of where their material's going and how it's being processed. I'll give you one analogy, Ben, and that is that about 2 years ago, we received an RFP from a major automotive company, European-based automotive company. And in their RFP, they were very clear and said, no high temperature processing of our material is allowed because they're very conscious of, they don't want their material generating a negative environmental impact. So that old method of processing, in our view, has a limited life because the reality is the world needs a better solution. Never mind it's a cheaper and more effective solution, but from an environmental perspective, I don't think that that traditional method will be sustainable for too much longer. But Ajay, maybe you want to add to that.
Oh, that's right. And I've just to simplify it also a little more, just use another analogy. I would almost say you sometimes in the recycling industry, those that want to be like the master of all, but also the master of none. So it's like trying to take all types of materials. Like they're even doing solar panels and electronic waste. They're trying to tackle a very big set of materials. So it's like you go to a restaurant and you order anything and everything off the menu. You may not be really good at any particular one of those things, but they do all those things. Whereas us as Li-Cycle, we want to be the fit for purpose solution for the lithium-ion universe. It's a big universe. It's a massive opportunity, big problem. And so we've done the technology side, the innovation, and tailoring for that to be fit for purpose for lithium-ion, even including, lithium iron phosphate batteries, LFP. This is what Tesla, if anybody heard their recent quarterly call, they're going to have a huge portion of their batteries that are lithium-ion. Yeah. Doesn't have any nickel, doesn't have any cobalt. So that's us. Think of us like the lithium-ion chefs as opposed to the general cuisine category. That's a very corny analogy, but that's all I think.
No, that's great insight from both of you. Thank you for that. And I think this kind of leads us into the whole Univar or Univar. I don't know how to say it, but your new partnership. So my question, does that open the door for new discussions with, additional auto manufacturers or just other parties in general?
Yeah, I can start. So if I were to distill our business in on the battery supply side into four verticals, there'd be environmental services. So you have kind of those that consolidate, batteries from other sources. You've obviously cell making, battery making, that's B2B. You have third, I'd categorize as, obviously the transportation, sector. So the second, obviously, manufacturing scrap. There's kind of like after sales for mobility. And then last is like stationary storage for utility scale residential, right? So there's these four kind of categories. And even the first can include batteries that are like cell phone batteries that have been collected, sort of. So the Univar partnership within that kind of framework fits in the first category. And they're a leading environmental services, total waste solution provider, and help people understand. It's like, okay, say we contract with an LTM, that's like a cell making factory. But as you go along the chain, eventually cells go into a pack, and then the pack goes into the vehicle. So when they make a vehicle, there's all sorts of scrap and rejects that come out of that factory, and some of the streams can be lithium-ion, of course, if they're making EVs. So Univar is an example of a company that works with those auto manufacturers, and this is public. They work with the Mercedes-Benzes of the world. They work with the Hondas of the world, the BMW. So VW. So that sort of broad gamut of auto manufacturing, but at that part of the chain, that's the solution that they're providing. And so we were selected by them, to be their partner for lithium-ion, which was a big vote of confidence. But it is in partnership with, and also based on input from typically the companies that they serve as well. So the point here for the funnel in is basically, just to summarize, we just want as big of a funnel, as many sources as possible to life cycle, direct through environmental services consolidation. We care, and we value partners like Univar, but that's our modus operandi. We want as many sources as possible.
Gotcha. Tim, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think Ajay captured that very elegantly.
All right. So, with LifeCycle, I've kind of noticed, I don't know if it's a new trend with the company, but around circular economics and the circular economy. And we had another recent, press release you guys put out was Univar, and we talked about Univar, but also with Hellbiz. And it seems, that there's an emphasis there on circular economics. So is this something we can expect to be a long-term direction of LifeCycle, developing these more circular economies?
Yeah, I think short answer is definitely, yeah. And I mean, to use the Hellbiz one as an example, I think it's also eye-opening for people too, to always remember all the form factors and types of lithium batteries that you interact with in your everyday life. Micromobility is a big one. So we get a ton of scooter, like micromobility type batteries, e-bike batteries, nodding his head vigorously, right? So we get those through like other consolidators, for example, too. They get those. One thing people should keep in mind is that sort of vertical. Maybe people use those scooters too. Unfortunately, they don't get super well treated. So they're high cycle, so they get used very quickly. So, there are pathways for them to be dealt with already, but increasingly companies like Hellbiz also want to be partnered with groups where they can talk about the circular economy around that, right? So sustainability is solution associated. And I guess your question also, Ben, if I just take it one further quickly, is, right now, if I just take a step back, our business model is with many, many different sources. And we make product, and that product goes back to diverse sources out. In the case of the hub, it goes to Traxxas, and then from them, it goes to all sorts of things. The circular economy model it's already circular in a way for the supply chain, but the circular economy model, maybe where you're going, is eventually where you get a unit of something from somebody and you send that unit back to them, right, for reuse. So I think this space will go there ultimately, but it's going to be phased. Right now, we're at that phase I described. The second phase would be where we start to link up product more so to the supply chains of our suppliers of the batteries. But it doesn't need to be the same unit. It could just be back to their supply chain. Okay. And then eventually, this is like very, very future. Then there's that true circular economy model where we get nth amount of material and then we return that nth amount of material to the customer. But that's how the space is changing. For us, it's huge opportunity either way. But there is that over time progression desire to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing a push from our customers, and we work very closely with Traxys in particular on the offtake side, who are looking for material in the market. They're in particular looking for recycled units, because of course with things like the EU battery directive stipulating minimum recycled content in batteries, there's not that many sources, and Li-Cycle is able to produce very good product. And we're at that stage now. We're starting to process and produce, more and more material on a regular basis. And so we're starting to see the increased focus on not just the fact that we can take the material and we can process it for them, but also the fact that we can then supply material back into their supply chain. So that sort of phase 2 that Ajay was talking about is really accelerating at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. You answered my question perfectly. So we're going to shift direction here just a little bit. I know in the past, the executives of Li-Cycle have mentioned the potential for acquisitions if you identify, the right target. So is there any update you can share on that? Like, have you reached out to any companies that look promising for a potential acquisition or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I could just say in general, I think we have a 3-pronged strategy. You've heard this talk with us before, and I'll go a little deeper on it to the extent I can. But, one is doing it ourselves. So really organic growth. And as Tim said, we love to follow our customers. Those customers want to go a certain place, and adding manufacturing capacity will go there. I think second is partnership. So we do see a need, for example, where there is really battery materials to be recycled. It's a great leading indicator of why we'll set up a place. So that can be a partnership, that can take numerous forms. And then the third prong is, I'd say it's opportunistic, and that goes to your question, Ben, is really around, potential inorganic, buy-side M&A. I'll say we always are, assessing different opportunities. I'll say it's not the biggest way that we're growing, but if there's a good tack-on value, makes a lot of sense, has a great rationale for the business, and it kind of unlocks an additional part of the market for us, has that outsized potential impact for our own growth, then we'll definitely look at it. But it's not like the prime mandate, I would say, of why we raise the money and how we're going. It's really organic.
Yeah, that's right, Ajay.
I appreciate that as an investor. You guys are very true to your roots and your path of where you want to take the company. So, looking back on this whole journey with Li-Cycle, when you first, started this company, did you always have a feeling that Li-Cycle could reach a valuation like, the close to $2 billion valuation it has right now? And, also along with all this promise the company has on the horizon to reach even higher valuations, is that always something you guys have seen as, potential for the company?
I would say we got into it because we saw the need in the market, and the need in the market ultimately drives valuation and what we can do. I mean, the reality is we spent, I was for almost 10 years helping clients build and spend billions of dollars producing lithium units to go into batteries, only to find out that when we got asked the question, well, what happens to these batteries at the end of their life? Well, nobody actually recovers the lithium. They generally burn it off and it's lost. To me, it was just such a, disconnect between why we were generating these units in the first place. And of course, being a true believer in electrification, the demand, it was clear that there was going to be several catalysts that pointed to the need for Li-Cycle. In terms of Li-Cycle's success in the market, look, we've had huge support from shareholders, including yourself, Ben, which we greatly appreciate, but also, from our customers that have enabled us to get to this point. I'd say that this is just the beginning. That, when I look forward 10 years from now, what I see is that recycling is a very dominant part of the overall supply chain for lithium-ion battery materials, and that lithium-ion batteries being in literally every facet of our lives and now in transport. And we've seen the materialization of EVs around the world today, that by then this is going to be an enormous industry. And Li-Cycle's part in it is going to be significant. So, did I think this on day one? Look, I think we always hoped and believed that the world would see it as we saw it, and it's been a great validation to to see, other people come along and realize the opportunity with us.
And I would just add to that, I think, Tim and I have always been very forward-looking, too obsessive about, like, you always say in like a tech startup, you're like product people, and then maybe more driven by the financial side. We're definitely are product guys. Like, we really are, in our case, it's hard tech, it's plants and really delivering for the customer. So we've obsessed there. And I think I was going to add two things. I think just what has been super rewarding, and obviously the byproduct on the capital market side is an outcome. It's not the objective ultimately for founders, right? That's the important mindset. But there's been a lot of really very exciting pivotal moments, like the Altium deal, for example. I mean, that took a year and a half to get there. And, all the auto manufacturers, battery manufacturers are being very thoughtful, and they vet companies really heavily, and they're looking for those strategic long-term partners. And so that was a big day.
Yeah.
I'll say for us. So things like that are like so rewarding, right? Because and then you look back and you say, wow, never would have thought we were there. But then you realize, hey, we have an awesome team, and it's indicative of where it's going. And then to the second point, what Tim was saying, when I hear some of our customers say, hey, long term, this is the urban mine. Like, we want to get these materials back, and it's going to take time to get there before we're like close to the 100% of the demand. So it's not right to say that that's today, but that's what their vision is. And so you think about that, and you say, well, this is a massive opportunity, and where we are now is just really scraping the potential in a great way. But you think about, even in a short span of time, there's a lot of potential ahead. So that's what excites us.
Yeah. No, as a shareholder, I can echo that. Just doing the research on the industry and the company, and just seeing that this is just the tip of the iceberg, if that, of what this could eventually become. One of my last questions here. I know this has gone on longer than we originally thought, but I can tell we're all passionate about this, so it's kind of awesome. Kind of just to wrap it all up, what would happen to end of life batteries if a company like LiCycle didn't exist? And what would the future look like without LiCycle?
Yeah, I mean, without LiCycle, the reality is that most of our lithium-ion batteries would end up in landfill. The sad part about lithium-ion batteries today, and it also is an opportunity for us, is that most of our consumer batteries, like the iPhone batteries, the laptop batteries of the world, end up in landfill today. Particularly here in North America, we're not yet at the point where we're really valuing those components, and that's where LiCycle comes in to unlock that potential. You then look at, so the material that is collected, unfortunately is going to probably end up in a high temperature process. They're going to burn off the plastics and the electrolyte. It's going to generate a whole lot of waste, a whole lot of emissions, and you're going to lose the lithium, in the largest extent. You're going to make it really difficult to make it economic to produce recycled lithium for the industry, which might even slow the growth of take-up of EVs and other things. So, Ben, it's a sad world, but therein lies the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think on the end of life side for high voltage batteries, we've seen this with auto recyclers and those who just don't know, like, the real future here. They just don't know what to do with them. Mm-hmm. And they end up sitting dormant, and they have risk. This isn't scrap material, like scrap metal. It has some complexity. So that's not a world I want to live in. And I think second, and just a bigger picture comment, I think a lot of our customers have acknowledged this. I don't think we'd be able to proliferate EVs effectively if there wasn't a good recycling solution. I think consumers would demand as such, like, heavily. I think the material side would be a massive issue long term. And I think ultimately you're going to hinder the uptake of EVs. So the bigger goal here is around climate. And if you can't meet that objective to proliferate EVs, then we haven't really met the mission. So that's the bigger picture role that we play.
No, I'm very grateful that a company like LiCycle exists. So one last thought here. We have the SPAC merger coming up here. You can go out and vote right now. LiCycle has a big banner on their investor relations page that literally says, "Go vote." And, as retail investors, our vote matters, to get this merger to go through. No offense to Peridot, but I would rather own LiCycle right now than paradox, right? So I don't know. As a close, can we get kind of like a, begging of retail investors to go vote by both of you?
Yeah. One last thought, Ajay, then you can close it out. But no, look, it is super important, Ben. We actually really love the engagement with the retail investment community. I mean, you can tell we're passionate about this company. This transaction is really important to the ultimate long-term success and our ability to roll out assets globally. And so if you are a shareholder, we just encourage you, go vote. Vote in favor. We think this is a great deal for the company, a great deal for shareholders, and a great deal for the world and the future of sustainability. So just to implore everyone to go get that done as soon as you can.
Yeah. So reminder that by August 4th at 11:59 p.m. you have to get your vote in. The shareholder meeting's on August 5th. It's coming up quickly. That's next week. And what we can do, Ben, we'll give you the link from our PR folks and IR folks. You can even toss up the link itself. And people have questions. We have an email where they can reach out. So just don't hesitate to reach out. And as Tim said, every vote counts. And so really do value the retail community input, of course, as well. But it's an exciting time. And we look forward to closing. We look forward to executing on the plan and having those who are listening and getting shareholders to continue as such. So we appreciate the support. And definitely get out and vote. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. So that concludes the interview here, guys. Thank you to Ajay and Tim for coming out and interviewing on my channel. I'm very grateful, for all the connections I've built on this journey. I'm going to turn it back over to the guys for any closing remarks here.
Yeah, I'll just start and then Tim can close out. Sorry, Tim. I think we are at a very exciting and unprecedented time in the whole electrification ramp. I was touching on in the interview how we've seen our customers acting and accelerating in ways that we've never seen before. And all that creates an imperative for recycling. And we started this business in 2016 from a place of trying to solve a technical issue and a customer issue. And our journey has, been super exciting, and we've learned a lot throughout the way and tailored what we do to be the best for the customer. And we'll continue to do that. But we're in execution mode, and this transaction that we're imminently closing in the next little bit, subject to getting everybody's votes, which I'm sure we will, is going to give us a platform to really execute and replicate what we're doing already commercially. It's not pie in the sky. We have commercial activity, and do more of this and really turbocharge the business. So we're excited about the path ahead, and we just really appreciate the support. I'll turn over to Tim.
Yeah, no, you said so well, Ajay, and thank you, Ben, and for all your viewers, hopefully also voters, viewers for taking an interest in what we're doing here at LifeCycle. We clearly believe that this is an important aspect to be addressed as a world, as a citizen, of whatever country you live in, and but also a great investment opportunity. I mean, we really strongly believe that this is the future, that we create a huge amount of value in what we do. And we're really looking forward to the next phase of the journey. Reach out, follow us on social media. Our team does a great job keeping everyone up to date out there. And of course, always feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions.